and movement. Luckily, the coat, style, and effects modes are the perfect tools to do that. They don't create new objects, they modify existing sculptures and paintings. And they work on groups. With just a little practice, you can become a master of them all. So let's start by adding some colour with the tint tool. Open the Assembly menu with the square button and go to the Modes menu. Each mode has its own set of tools and options. The tint tool is in coat mode. It has an icon that looks like a pot of paint being spilled. Select it by pressing the X button. As you can see, the Assembly menu has now been replaced with the Coat menu. In the top row, you'll find Options and Helpers. Along the bottom, you'll find the tools. Now, which colour to use? Open the Colours menu in the top row of icons. These are colour groups. You can expand a colour group with X. Each group contains more shades that you can choose from. I'm going to find a green for the foliage, but if green's not your thing, you can experiment. Is the menu too long? You can scroll it by grabbing it with R2. Pick a shade, or if you fancy a more painterly or organic look, choose the tumbler colour at the end of the group. That will apply a random shade that changes as you work. When you've chosen a colour, you're ready to go to the next step. To add colour to our scene, we'll use the Tint tool, which has an icon like an airbrush. You can manually select it in the Tools menu. But in Coat mode, choosing a colour from the Colours menu equips the Tint tool automatically. See the airbrush icon on the tip of your imp. The Tint tool recolours objects, either tinting or completely covering their original colour. Just press and hold R2 to tint the objects at the tip of your imp. No need to select or scope into anything. The rounded clumps look a bit dreary in this scene. Let's add some colour. You can see that the longer you hold R2, the stronger the tint gets. And with a tumbler colour selected, it will cycle through different shades. If you make a mistake, you can undo using the left directional button. Or set your tool to subtract and you can detint. How do you do that? If you press triangle while the tool is active, your imp will change to an outline. So now it will remove tint instead of adding it. And that works on pretty much all of the coat, style and effects tools. Just press triangle when they're equipped to make them subtractive. Try removing some colour using subtractive tint now. Just hold R2 over the object. And to make the tool additive again, press triangle. Now that you've got to grips with that, you can colour in the whole scene with the tint tool. Go wild! Use different colours to tint the path, rocks, river, grass, trees, and the little cottage. The Colours menu has all the colours you need. Just open a colour group and pick a shade, or the tumbler colour. Take some time to colour your scene. When you're done, move on to the next step. Good job! Now your scene is beautifully coloured in, let's add some texture to it. For that, we need to leave Coat mode and go into Style mode. To leave a mode, select the Exit button in the top right of the screen. Or you can use a shortcut. Hold L1 and press Circle. Just like scoping out of a group. Now use the Modes menu to switch over to Style mode. The Style mode icon is an S-shaped brushstroke. All sculptures and paintings in Dreams are made up of flecks, and Style mode is where we manipulate them. For example, notice how the objects in this scene look smooth. That's because their flecks are small and tightly packed together. We can make them more textured with the Looseness tool. Select the Looseness tool. It looks like a blurry circle. Now try using R2 to loosen some of the foliage in the scene. Don't hold back. As you can see, loosening sculptures and paintings means their flecks become more obvious. If you think they're getting too loose, press triangle to make the tool subtractive and tighten them up again with R2. Or you can just use the left directional button to undo. Don't forget to loosen up the river too. We'll need it in the following steps. Carry on loosening the objects in the scene. When you're happy, proceed to the next step. Wonderful! Connie's garden looks like a lovely painting. Let's look at the water now. Water has a reflective quality, so let's add some shine to the river. This is where the Finish tool comes in. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colors menu in Coat mode, you'll find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. These finishes change the way objects react to light in your scene. Using finishes, you can make objects shiny, rough, metallic, or even translucent. Now you can choose your finish for the river. Let's see. Ah, yes. How about shiny wax? Wax finishes are translucent, and the shine will give the river a reflective surface that will catch the light. Apply the finishes before using R2. Remember that you can revert your changes by switching to subtractive mode with triangle or by using undo. Try editing the finish on other groups and objects in the scene. Continue to the next step when you're ready. Our river looks nice and shiny now, but something's missing. It doesn't flow like water does. But there's a magical tool for that in effects mode. It's called the Flow tool. Leave Coat mode if you haven't already, and enter effects mode. The effects mode icon has some twinkly stars on it. Alongside the Flow tool, you'll notice other animated effects that you can apply to sculptures or paintings. But for now, we'll pick the Flow tool. Its icon is a tap, or a faucet if you're from the US. Press X over the Flow tool to select it, and use R2 to apply it to the river. Isn't that lovely? In effects mode, you can preview the flow effect even when time is paused. But if you leave effects mode, you'll need to click R3 to see the effects in action. When the river's flowing at the right speed, you may notice something a bit odd. It's flowing the wrong way. Let's fix that using another tool found in Style mode, the Comb tool. Leave effects mode using L1 and circle, then go back into Style mode via the Modes menu. The Comb tool icon is some wavy lines. Select it with X. Now we're going to make the river flow the correct way. How do we do that? You guessed it. Hold R2 to comb the flecks of the river so they go in the right direction. We're no longer in effects mode, so we can't see the flow effect animating. But just click R3 to start time, and you'll be able to see it again. The key is to move your imp in the direction you'd like the flex to flow. A bit like you're combing the river's hair. Very stylish. Let go of R2 when you're happy with the flow direction. And now you can see the river is going the correct way. But if it isn't, just undo and try again. When you're happy with the speed and direction of the river, click L3 to rewind time. Then it's off to the next step. This scene is really coming together. Next, let's do something interesting with the chimney smoke. Move closer to the smoke so you can see the flecks clearly. These flecks don't look very smoky, do they? Let's change that. If you're not already in style mode, head there now using the modes menu. Open the flex menu with X. It's the button in the center of the top row. Now choose a fleck that looks smoky. How about the dots fleck? When you choose a fleck type, it'll automatically select the Apply Fleck tool. Now, hover your imp over the smoke and hold R2. The flecks will change. That's better. Let's inspect it now using the grab cam. Grab it with R1. And while you're grabbing, spin around it with the left or right stick. The paint strokes look a bit flat, don't they? You can only see them well from certain angles. We can make it a bit more billowy and three-dimensional using the Impasto tool. In the Style menu, select the Impasto tool, then hold R2 to apply it to the smoke. Watch as the individual flecks of the painting become more three-dimensional. To see it better, use the grab cam to spin around the smoke again. You can also press undo and redo to compare the smoke with and without Impasto. Now that you've mastered Impasto, the last style tool we're going to use is the Ruffle tool. The Ruffle tool icon looks like a lot of lines going in different directions. It will randomly rotate the flecks so they're not as orderly. It works in the same way as the other two tools. Select it with X, then use R2 to apply it. And switch the tool to subtractive by pressing triangle. Ruffle makes quite a difference, doesn't it? Why not see if you can animate the smoke using the flow tool in effects mode? When you're happy, go to the next step of the tutorial. Now that the scene is looking good, we should make Connie's cottage look more welcoming for her. We can do that using something called the Glow tool. So head back to the Modes menu and into Coat mode. The Glow tool has an icon that looks like a little sun. Select it with X. Then move your view over to the cottage for a closer look. Now position your view so that you can see the door and the window of the cottage. Then hold R2 over the window in the door to make it glow. Go on, give it some welly. Whoa, that's too bright. Let's press triangle to make the tool subtractive, then use R2 to reduce the glow. Maybe you could try tinting the window to change the color of the light. See what you think. Have a play with the glow tool, and then move on to the next step when you're ready. The scene looks so alive now, and Connie's in love with her new home. It's hard to believe that this scene used to be all grey and blocky. Let's try something. How different did we actually make it? To see, we can use a special trick. Press square to open the menu, and then take a look in the Show Hide section. The Show Hide icon looks like an open eye. It can be found in most of the mode's menus. In the Show Hide menu, you can make all sorts of different objects visible or invisible. It only works in edit mode, so your scene will still look the same in play mode. Some of them are on by default, and some are switched off. Coat, Style and Effects is one of the options which is on by default. Its icon is a combination of the icons for all three of those modes. Try turning it off by pressing X over it. Wow, what an amazing difference. That shows you how powerful these tools really are. Using Coat, Style and Effects, you can make even the most boring block come alive. Practice using the tools and see what you can come up with. When you're finished, go to Play Mode in the Options menu and walk Connie into her beautiful new home. This will complete the tutorial. Another way to edit animations is to tweak them. Hold L1 and press the square button over the Action Recorder gadget to open its Tweak menu. Here you can see all the tweaks for the Action Recorder. By default, the playback mode is set to loop, so it plays the animation over and over again. But you can set them to play once, sustain, or to ping pong. Once will play the whole animation just one time. Sustain will play the animation for as long as the Action Recorder has power. If it loses power, it will stop. Then it will continue from that point when it's powered again. Ping pong plays the animation forward once, and then plays it in reverse. Then forward, then backwards, and so on. That sounds like a good option for our floating ledge. Select ping pong with X. Click R3 to start time and play the animation. You can also change the animation speed to make it slower or faster. Grab the slider with X and use your imp to change the speed. If you want to explore more of the Action Recorder tweaks, you can. If you hover over any button for a few seconds, a more info tip will explain what that tweak does. To close the tweak menu, just hold L1 and press the circle button anywhere over it. And of course, you can undo any changes you make by pressing the left directional button. Switch to play mode to test your changes. When you're ready, come back to edit mode and start the next step. Now that Connie's made it up to the higher platform, how will she get back down to the next one? First, rewind time with L3. You probably already know about cloning objects, but do you know that you can clone their animations along with them? I'm sure you remember how to clone, but if not, just hold L1 and grab the ledge you animated with R2. Once you've made the clone, release L1, then move the ledge to the other side and release R2 to place it. Not only did you clone the ledge, but you also cloned its animation. Click R3 to start time. Now we just need to flip it so that it moves in the correct direction. First, make sure you rewind time. Grab the platform with R2. Then click L3 to flip it horizontally. Depending on where you grabbed it, you might have to move it closer to the other platform after flipping. You may also need to realign it with triangle before releasing R2 to put it back down. Now click R3 to start time, and the platform should move in opposite directions. Both animations are stored in the same action recorder. So if you retake or delete the action recorder, it will affect both animations. Now go into play mode and see if Connie can make it across both gaps. Switch back to edit mode when you're ready to move on. Now let's get Connie to Cuthbert and get them through the door. I've placed a shiny helper cube. Let's call it Cuthbot. That holds up the next platform, but it's not very animated at the moment. To get it to walk back and forth towards the exit, we need to use Record Possession. It allows you to possess puppets and record a performance with them. Open the Assembly menu, then go to the Animate menu. Select Record Possession. It's the button with the sock puppet icon. Your imp can now possess the puppets in the scene. In the Context menu, you'll see the Count-In button. When this is selected, you'll get a 3-second count-in before recording starts. Press R2 over the Cuthbot to possess the puppet and start the countdown. When the count reaches 0, the possession recorder begins recording. Unlike the action recorder, it records constantly. So time will be recorded even when the cube isn't moving. Walk the Cuthbot around the obstacles to the final platform. Pause for a moment, turn around, then walk back to where the Cuthbot started. Starting and ending at the same place will help to make the animation loop smoothly. Press the circle button to depossess. You'll notice that the recording pauses when you depossess. Select Stop Recording in the Context menu to exit the possession recorder. Once you've stopped recording, click L3 to rewind time, then R3 to start time, and watch what you've recorded. In the last step, I'll show you how to edit the recorded possession. You may have noticed a possession recorder gadget has appeared next to the cuff bot. When you're using Record Possession, this gadget appears the moment you press the Stop Recording button. Select it with X to view the animation path. The Possession Recorder gadget also lets you edit and tweak the animation. Hold L1 and press X over the Possession Recorder to scope in and edit it. Just like the Action Recorder, you can choose to retake the animation by selecting the button in the context menu. To stop editing the Possession Recorder, select Stop Recording in the context menu. Or hold L1 and press the circle button to quickly scope out. You can also tweak the Possession Recorder with L1 and the square button. It has exactly the same options as the Action Recorder. Experiment with the recorder and the different tweak options. Remember, you can see more info about the tweak settings by hovering over them for a few seconds. Close the tweak menu by pressing L1 and the circle button anywhere over it. Once you're done editing, switch over to play mode to test out the completed scene. Then Connie can navigate to the last platform and help Cuthbert through the door to complete the tutorial.
It's a beautiful day in the Dreamiverse, so Cuthbert's heading out for a stroll. It's a hard life being a cube. But Connie can't resist a practical joke, so she's dreamt up a spooky surprise for Cuthbert. She's gonna need your help to pull off this hair-raising prank. With a little lighting and atmosphere, we can transform this scene. But let's do a bit of redecorating first. Go to the assembly menu and select the search button with X. I've prepared a little collection of eerie elements for you to use. Open up the collection with X. Start by stamping a moon in the sky. Then stamp as many gravestones, crows, and flaming skulls as you want. Just make sure you don't block the path. And don't stamp any spooky doors. We won't need one until later on. These spindly trees are made from paint strokes, which means they don't cast shadows. Delete them with the triangle button and replace them with the spooky tree in the collection. Once you're happy with the spook levels, move on to the next step, where I'll show you how to change the lighting in the scene. To make the sky look like it's nighttime, we can use a sun and sky gadget. Go to the assembly menu and select Gadgets. Take a look in the cameras and lighting section. Here's where you'll find the sun and sky gadget. Its icon is a sun and a cloud. Select it with X and then stamp one above the garden using R2 or X. We only need one, so unequip the gadget with circle once you've stamped it. Sun and sky looks quite different to most gadgets. It's round instead of square, and it also has these two gizmos attached to it. Unlike most gadgets, the sun and sky gizmos are always visible. The ball on top of the gadget represents the sky image that's projected around the scene. Grab it with R2 to move the sky image, or hold L2 to rotate it using the motion sensor function or the sticks. Look at how the sky changes. The smaller gizmo controls the sun brightness, position and size. Grab the sun gizmo with R2. The sun gets brighter the closer it is to the sky gizmo. You can also move the sun around the gadget to change its position in the sky. This also changes the direction of the sunlight. The sun is the main light source in the scene. You can resize the sun using the up and down directional buttons while hovering over the gizmo. Resizing the sun doesn't affect its brightness. It just makes it appear larger or smaller in the sky. Try out the gizmos and get a feel for how they change the sky. You can always undo any changes with the left directional button. Start the next step when you're ready to continue. Using gizmos lets us quickly experiment with different sun and sky settings. But for some deeper control, we can use the gadget's tweak menu. Hover over the gadget, hold L1, then press square to open its tweak menu. The Sun and Sky tweak menu has 2 pages, one for the sun and one for the sky. The first page is Sun Properties. It has all the settings we changed with the gizmo, as well as a few options that are only available in the tweak menu. Sun Visible determines whether the sun can be seen in the sky, and Cast Shadows controls whether its light casts shadows. We're creating a night sky, so deselect Sun Visible. It's the button with the eye icon. Hiding the sun doesn't turn it off completely, though. It'll still emit light in the scene, even when it's not visible. You just won't see it in the sky. You can change the colour of the sun using the colour picker. Hover over the colour picker and you'll see a ring around the edge and a triangle in the centre. Grab the ring with X and move the dial to change the colour. Grab the triangle in the middle to change the shade. A bluish purple should set the scene nicely. It's starting to feel a lot more like nighttime now. In the next step, I'll show you how to adjust the sky. If you've closed the Sun and Sky tweak menu, open it up again with L1 and square. The second page of the tweak menu, Sky Properties, contains all the options for editing the sky. Its icon is a cloud. Select it with X. The tweak menu gives you more options than the gizmo. The first slider picks an image for the sky. Cycle through them by pressing the up and down directional buttons. Choose one that fits the gloomy scene. Use the sky gizmo to rotate the sky image. Find a position you like. The sky is made of flecks. You'll know all about flecks if you've played the painting tutorial. You can pick a style for the sky using the Sky Fleck type slider. The next 2 sliders control sky brightness and saturation. If you turn the brightness down to 0, your sky will be pitch black. But if you make it a bit brighter, you'll still be able to see some of the sky's colour and detail. To change the colour of the sky, you can use the colour picker. It works just like the one we use to change the sun colour. Grab the outer ring with X to change the colour, then grab the triangle in the middle to change the shade. But if you've set the sky brightness or saturation to 0, you won't see any changes to the sky colour. Experiment with the tweak menu settings and create a spooky night sky. Then start the next step when you're ready to continue. When creating a dark scene, it can be tricky to see what's going on. You could end up completely lost in a scene. If you do find yourself stumbling around in the dark, there's a useful guide you can use, which will temporarily turn off all the moody lighting. Go to the Assembly menu, then select Guides with X. Look for Studio Lighting Then select it with X to turn it on. That's better, isn't it? Now we can see everything properly again. Studio lighting fills the scene with a bright, ambient light. Any lighting, grading or fog will be disabled so you can see exactly where everything is and what it looks like. Deselect the studio lighting button to turn all your atmospheric gadgets back on. Studio lighting is only active in edit mode, so the scene will still be dark and spooky when we go into play mode. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode and start the next step. The sun and sky gadget isn't the only way to light a scene. You might have noticed that there's a light gadget in the scene. Light gadgets can be used to create more sophisticated lighting, or to illuminate specific areas or objects. If you can't see it properly, just check that you don't have studio lighting switched on. Grab the light with R2 to move it around. Or grab it with L2 and use the motion sensor function to rotate it. You can add more lights to the scene from the assembly menu. Go to the Gadgets menu, then open Cameras and Lighting. Select the Light gadget with X and stamp one in your scene, then press Circle to drop the gadget from your imp. If you select the light with X, you'll reveal its gizmo. This cone-shaped gizmo shows the angle and range of the light. Hover your imp over the edges of the cone and grab them with R2. Move your imp to widen the angle or extend the range of the light. You can grab the white dot at the end of the cone to change the range, angle and direction all at the same time. You can move and rotate the whole light independently of the gadget by grabbing the positional gizmo with R2 or L2. When lighting a scene, it's important to consider how the player will see it. If you pull back from the garden, you'll see that there's a camera gadget in the scene. Switch over to play mode to see how the scene looks through that camera. Having a defined viewing angle can help inform your lighting choices. So keep in mind the camera angle when you're setting up your lights. Try editing your lights using the gizmos to illuminate an area of your scene. Of course, the gizmos aren't the only way to edit lights. Like everything else, lights can also be tweaked. We'll take a look at that in the next step. So let's take a look at the Light Tweak menu. Hover your imp over a light in the scene, hold L1, then press square. Lights can either be spot or diffuse. Spotlights illuminate in a specific direction, whereas diffuse lights cast in all directions. Light gadgets are set to be spotlights by default. But you can easily change their type by selecting the diffuse button. For this scene, it's better if we stick to using spotlights though. Notice the spotlight has tweak sliders for beam range and beam angle. These sliders do the same thing as the gizmos we used in the last step, but they give you more precise control. The fade angle slider changes the softness of the spot. At 0%, the spot will have a sharp edge. As you increase the slider, the edge will become softer. Deselecting the Cast Shadows button will stop the light from casting shadows. A very useful feature, but not for our spooky garden, as shadows will add to the overall atmosphere. The last two sliders, Use Image and Image Blur, allow you to project an image with the light. Images can be used to break up the light and add texture, making it look like it's coming through clouds or trees. Hover over the Use Image slider and use the up and down directional buttons to cycle through the images. Find one that suits the scene. This one looks good. The Image Blur slider can soften the image for a more subtle effect. When you've finished tweaking the light, close the tweak menu using L1 and circle. Now you've set up one light, you can clone it and use it in other parts of the scene. Think about where light would naturally be coming from in the scene, the moon or the fires, for example. When you've finished lighting your scene, head back to edit mode for the next step, where I'll show you how to add fog. Now we're going to literally add some atmosphere to the scene using a fog gadget. Close any tweak menus you may have open and press circle to deselect everything in the scene. Open the assembly menu. Press square if it's closed. Select Gadgets, then Cameras and Lighting. The fog gadget icon looks like a cloud. Select it with X. We'll use this gadget to create some low-lying mist in the garden. Stamp a fog gadget somewhere in the garden with R2 or X. How about around one of the gravestones? Once you've done that, press circle to drop the gadget from your imp. To edit the fog, we'll use its gizmos. Select the gadget with X to reveal them. The zone shows you the area that will be foggy. You can grab the zone with R2 to extend it. Look closely and you'll notice that the fog gadget actually has two zones. The outer zone is the fog's fall-off zone. To adjust the fall-off, you'll need to hold L1 before grabbing the edges of the zone. Have a go now. Hold L1, then grab the zone with R2 to edit the fall-off zone. In the fall-off zone, the fog becomes gradually less and less dense until it's completely dissipated. Extend it to make the fog fade away gradually, or pull it in to have a tight ball of fog instead. Above the gadget, you'll find a position or gizmo. Use it to move the zone independently of the gadget. In the next step, we'll tweak the fog to change its colour and density. The fog is so thick I can barely see Connie. Let's see if we can improve its look in the tweak menu. Hold L1, then press square over the gadget. The fog's tweak menu has two pages, Properties and Zone Size. On the Properties page, use the fog density slider to thin out the fog a little. There's also a colour picker if you want to change the colour of the fog. Adjusting the various noise sliders is another way of changing the fog's appearance. Increasing noise strength will vary the density of the fog, making it appear patchier. The noise scale makes the patches larger or smaller, and the noise speed slider adds movement to the fog for a billowing look. There's also a slider to add glow to the fog. Add just a tiny bit of glow to make the fog look like it's catching the light. Now let's look at what the Zone Size tab has to offer. Select it at the top of the tweak menu. You can use the sliders on this page to adjust the zone size and zone fall-off, just like you could with the zones themselves. You can also change the shape of the zone in the tweak menu. Change the zone's shape to cube, then use the sliders or the gizmos to create a layer of ground fog. Doesn't that look good? In the next step, we'll add some colour grading and effects. The garden is looking very spooky now. The finishing touches will be to add some grading and effects. Grade and effects changes the look of the whole scene. It's a bit like adding a photo filter. Let's take a look. Open the assembly menu. Press square if it's closed. In cameras and lighting, look for the grade and effects gadget. The icon is an instant photo with some sparkles on it. Select it with X, then stamp one anywhere in your scene. There are no gizmos for this gadget, so open its tweak menu to explore the settings. Grade and Effects is a powerful gadget with a handful of tweak menu pages. The first page, Light and Colour, has settings for brightness, contrast and saturation. Try using the sliders to refine the nighttime look of the scene. If the grass still looks a bit too green, we can fix that by easing off the saturation. Use the brightness and contrast settings to bring out the shadows. Ooh, I'm getting chills. Everything in Grade and Effects changes the look of the scene in some way. You'll be able to figure out what most things do just by experimenting with them. Take a look through the rest of the tweak menu to see the gadget's full potential. On the colour tinting page, you can individually tint the shadows, midtones and highlights of the scene. Screen effects add filmic touches like vignette, lens flare or grain. When it comes to grading and effects, there's no right or wrong answers. It's all about creating a look that suits your scene. Most of the time, less is more, but it can be fun to test the extremes too. Remember, you can always undo using the left directional button, and you can reset any tweak slider by hovering over it with your imp and pressing triangle. Or use the studio lighting guide to hide all the effects. To complete the tutorial, you'll need to stamp the spooky door in the scene. You can find it in the tutorial collection. Once you've placed the door, head into play mode. Walk Connie through the spooky door to see what Cuthbert thinks about the garden's new look.
Oh dear, it looks like Cuthbert is really stuck this time. In previous tutorials, you've edited the scene to help Connie reach Cuthbert. But this time, you'll be editing Connie herself, supercharging her with some new abilities to get past the obstacles in the scene. Bear in mind that this is a complex tutorial in which it's easy to make a mistake. If you do, remember to use the left directional button to undo. Now go into play mode and see how far you can get. Possess Connie with R2 and press the X button to jump. Oops, she can't even get over the first obstacle. So let's start by souping up her jump height. Switch back to edit mode and we'll get started. To change Connie's jump height, all we need to do is tweak her. So hover over her, hold L1 and press the square button to open her tweak menu. This is a puppet tweak menu. As you can see, it's jam-packed with different options. Thankfully, the setting we want is on the first page. All these settings control Connie's overall movement. We could make Connie run super fast or super slow. But nah, that's not gonna help her. A nice high jump is what we need. What do we have here? This slider controls Connie's jump height. Hover over it with your imp and hold X to grab it. Move your imp to adjust the slider to around 3 meters. That should be enough to get over that stack of blocks. The Puppet Tweak menu also has some really useful testing controls. Click R3 to start time, and Connie will come to life. See what happens now if you hover your imp over the jump height slider. You can preview the jump, so you can get it to the perfect height without having to test it in play mode. Actually, I think you should dial it back to 2.5 meters, or she might overshoot the jump. You can make small adjustments to sliders by using the up and down directional buttons. Hover over the slider and use the down directional button to adjust the setting. Feel free to explore some of the other settings in the menu. If you're not sure what a button or slider does, just hover over it for a few seconds and a more info tip will pop up to explain. You can even adjust the strength of gravity on her jump. Turn it down a bit to make her jump more floaty. When you've got Connie's jump the way you want it, give it a test run in play mode. See how far Connie can get now, then move on to the next step when you're ready to continue. Well, that was pretty cool. Unfortunately, Connie's new jumping skills aren't going to be much use on the next obstacle. And don't even think about making her jump over the top, because that force field will zap her in a second. Instead, let's give Connie the power to crouch. I bet she's always dreamed of it. If you're still in play mode, switch back to edit mode now. Rewind time with L3 to put Connie back at the start. To give her a crouch, we need to scope into her. Puppets are made up of sculptures, connectors, and gadgets that are grouped together. Hover over Connie, press and hold L1, then press X to scope in. When you've scoped into a puppet, you can see its inner workings. On Connie's back, there's a microchip gadget. It's called Connie's brain, and it contains all her logic and animations. Let's take a look inside. Hold L1 and press X over it to scope in and open the microchip canvas. There's quite a lot going on in here. The gadget I want you to look at is this one in the bottom right corner with the diamond icon. This is a keyframe gadget. If you've played through the Keyframes and Timelines tutorial, you'll already know all about these. Keyframes record changes to things in the scene. They store those changes in a gadget, which can be triggered using logic. This keyframe contains a crouching pose for Connie. Select the keyframe with X, and you'll see a preview of how it looks. Those dashed lines over Connie show that she's being changed by the keyframe. Press circle to deselect the keyframe, and she goes back to normal. To be able to activate the crouch keyframe, we need to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. Then you'll be able to make her crouch with a controller button. In the next step, I'll show you how to do exactly that. To activate the crouch, we're going to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. If you've closed her microchip, scope back into her and then scope into the microchip to open it up again. The controller sensor is the large gadget on Connie's microchip. It has a controller icon on it. Open up its tweak menu with L1 and square. Now you have a microchip and a tweak menu open, you may need to arrange them on the screen. Make sure that the controller sensor and its tweak menu stay to the left. This is because they generate signals, and signals flow through gadgets from left to right in Dreams. You can also save the 3D space position of tweak menus and microchips, or pin them to the screen, using the buttons that appear at the top when hovering over the canvas. This will help you keep them tidy while you're editing logic, which is very important as it's easy to make mistakes. Now, let's take a closer look at that controller sensor. Ah, look, controller buttons. Just what we need. All playable characters contain a controller sensor gadget like this one. But the gadget can also be used for any situation where you want to detect button presses. To assign our keyframe to a button, we just need to wire it to the controller sensor. We won't use a circle button as that depossesses Connie, and X makes her jump. So how about the square button to crouch? Make sure you can see the keyframe on the microchip. Move the tweak menu with R2 if you need to. If you hover over the square button in the controller sensor menu, you'll see ports appear on either side of it. They're just like the ports you see on gadgets. Ports on the left are inputs, and ports on the right are outputs. Now, you need to be very precise for the next part, as it's easy to make a mistake. Carefully hover your imp over the output port of the square button, and press X to create a wire. Stretch that wire over to the keyframe, and connect it to the power port on the bottom of the gadget with X. If at any time you make a mistake, just undo it using the left directional button. Once your crouch move is all wired up, close the controller sensor tweak menu. Hover over it, hold L1, then press circle to close. Now try out Connie's new crouch in play mode. See if she can make it under the second obstacle. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 and start the next step. Right, we're on to the final obstacle. There's no way around it, but it looks destructible. So we're going to make a slam attack for Connie so that she can smash through it. We'll start by recording a pose for the slam. We can do this using a keyframe. Scope back into Connie and open up her microchip if it isn't already open. If you've played my Keyframes and Timelines tutorial, you'll have a bit of a head start on this next part. Go to the Assembly menu and open the Animate menu. Select the keyframe with X. You'll now have a keyframe gadget on your imp. Stamp it somewhere in the scene with R2 or X. The keyframe records changes you make to objects and settings in the scene. It starts recording as soon as you stamp it. You can tell it's recording because your imp will change shape and colour. Now that we're recording, grab Connie's upper body with R2 and drag it gently down to the floor. Because we're scoped into her, we can move her body parts individually to create a pose. If we weren't scoped in, we'd move Connie's whole body. Notice that her knees automatically bend. Make sure her cone is all the way down to the floor so that you can't see her legs. Keyframes can record changes to anything, even tweak menu settings. So, just for visual flair, let's also make her glow. Hover over Connie's cone, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. Because we're scoped in, this opens the tweak menu for the sculpture itself, rather than the puppet. All the settings on this page change the way Connie's cone looks. Look for the glow slider on the first page. Its icon is a sun. Raise the glow up to about 40%. Once you've set the glow, select Stop Recording in the context menu to store the changes to the keyframe. You can close the tweak menu now too. Just hover over it, hold L1 and press circle. Select the keyframe gadget with X to preview what's been recorded. Looks good. Deselect the keyframe by pressing circle. In the next step, we'll continue building Connie's slam attack. The next step is to place our new Connie animation into a timeline. Using a timeline will let us time the animations and effects of the slam attack. Go to the Assembly menu and back to the Animate menu. Select the timeline with X. Hover over Connie's microchip and stamp a timeline above the crouch keyframe. Now let's open the timeline canvas with L1 and X. The slam attack should be a really quick animation. So adjust the canvas so it's only 1 second long. Any longer and it won't feel snappy enough. Hover over the edge of the timeline canvas so that a white line appears along it. You'll also see a white double-ended arrow appear next to the edge by your imp. When you see this, grab the edge of the canvas with X. Move your imp to shorten the timeline to 1 second. Make sure you don't select the trim button by mistake. It's a square button by the numbers at the top of the timeline. It has a black arrow on it. The timeline duration is now correct, but the space is very small. So let's zoom in a bit. Hover your imp over the timeline canvas, hold L1 and press the right directional button to zoom in. This will keep the timeline duration to 1 second long, but stretch the space so that you can fit more detail into it. If you need to zoom out, just hold L1 and press the left directional button. Now let's put our slam attack keyframe onto the timeline. Grab the keyframe with R2 and place it at the start of the timeline canvas. Make sure you've got the slam keyframe and not the crouch one. The gadget automatically snaps to the surface of the canvas. The keyframe is only a fraction of a second long at the moment, but we need it to fill the length of the timeline. So hover over the keyframe and hold the up directional button to scale it. Make it the same length as the timeline. Now we want to wire the timeline up to a button press, just like we did with the crouch. Move the timeline canvas so that you can see the controller sensor and the timeline gadget. Open the controller sensor tweak menu with L1 and square. I'm going to use L1 as the slam attack button. Hover over the output port of the L1 button and press X to create a wire. Stretch the wire down to the timeline gadget and connect it to the power port on the bottom. You can now use the L1 button to perform Connie's slam attack. Give it a try in play mode. At the moment, it's just an animation, so it's not going to do anything to the blocks. But in the next step, I'll show you how to add some force to it. When you're ready to continue, return to edit mode, rewind time, and start the next step. The slam attack animation is all set up, but it's not doing much besides looking cool, so we need to add a gadget to our timeline that will emit a force when Connie slams the ground. The gadget we're going to use for this is the force applier. Go to the Assembly menu and open the Gadgets menu. Find the Move as an Output menu and open it with X. The icon for the force applier looks like a gust of wind. Select it with X to equip it to your imp. I hope you've still got the timeline open. If not, open it with L1 and X. Stamp the force applier onto the timeline canvas below the keyframe. Press circle to unequip the force applier from your imp. The force applier isn't very strong by default, so we'll need to tweak it. To open its tweak menu, hover over the gadget, hold L1 and press square. At the top of the tweak menu is the force strength slider. Its icon is a beefy arm. Drag it all the way up to 100% using your imp. That will ensure the force emitted will overcome the gravity in the scene and the friction between the blocks. Next, increase the force speed to 10 meters per second. That will give the slam attack some punch. If you take a look at Connie, you'll see a green zone around her. Anything in this zone will be affected by the force applier. At the moment, the zone isn't much bigger than Connie. Hover your imp over the zone and arrow gizmos will appear. Grab them with R2 and move your imp to change the size of the zone. Or you can scale the zone more precisely in the Force Applier Tweak menu. Go to the tab called Zone Size. Grab the zone size slider with X and set it to about 3.5 meters. OK, let's test out Connie's new powers. Switch over to play mode. Possess Connie and give her new slam attack a try. Oops! Looks like it's more power than Connie can handle. The force applier is pushing her off the platform. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time. In the final step, I'll show you how to tweak the force applier so that it only affects the objects we want it to. To prevent the force applier from pushing Connie off the platforms, we're going to use labels. Labels can be given to any object in the scene, and gadgets like the force applier can detect them. In the Force Applier Tweak menu, go to the Labels tab. By default, it will detect all labels. There are labels for all sorts of objects: foes, scenery, targets. The friend label is used for playable characters like Connie or friendly characters like Cuthbert. So if we deselect it, the force applier will no longer affect Connie. Hover over the friend button and press and detect them. In the Force Applier Tweak menu, go to the Labels tab. By default, it will detect all labels. There are labels for all sorts of objects: foes, scenery, targets. The friend label is used for playable characters like Connie or friendly characters like Cuthbert. So if we deselect it, the force applier will no longer affect Connie. Hover over the friend button and press X to deselect it. It's the button with the heart icon. Now Connie should be able to blast through the blocks without firing herself off into space. Use her new skills to pass all the obstacles. And you can use your new skills to create some characters for your scenes. When you've successfully rescued Cuthbert, go through the door to finish this tutorial. There's nothing quite like sculpting something from scratch. But you'll need a good grasp of the tools to avoid coming unstuck. So let's get down to it. Maybe Cuthbert will learn something too. Go to the Assembly menu. Press the square button to open it if it's closed, and select the Modes menu with the X button. Select Sculpt Mode with X. Its icon has some 3D shapes on it. Every time you enter Sculpt Mode from the Modes menu, a new sculpture will be created. You'll also notice that when you're in Sculpt Mode, everything outside the sculpture will be blurred and greyed out. This is to help you focus on what you're creating. You can adjust visual feedback in your preferences, which you can find in the Options menu. When you first enter Sculpt Mode, the Shapes menu will open automatically and the Smear Shape tool will be equipped to your imp. Try smearing a shape now by holding R2 and moving your imp around. Now that's out of your system, undo all of it by using the left directional button. By using this tool, we'll help Connie get across the first gap. Move your view a bit closer to the action, looking side on at the space between the platforms. Make sure you can see the platforms and that your imp can reach them. We want to build an organic structure for Connie to walk on, so let's pick an appropriate shape. Select one from the Shapes menu, and you'll see it on the end of your imp. Use the up and down directional buttons to scale it to an appropriate size. While you have a shape on your imp, you can use the grab cam to zoom in and out. Just hold R1 and use the left stick. Now position your imp next to the platform on one side of the gap. Then hold down R2 and use the motion sensor function or the left stick to smear your shape in the gap so that Connie can walk on it. If you want to have another go at it, just undo using the left directional button. Feel free to press and let go of R2 as many times as you want. Each press will create a new edit within your sculpture. Bear in mind that all the edits you make are part of a single sculpture, even if they aren't connected. This means that in assembly mode, they'll behave like a single object. Why not try out different shapes to see what works best? Try holding L2 as you sculpt and use the left and right sticks to rotate the shape. Maybe try making something like a rock formation or a tree trunk. The cool thing is, sculptures are automatically physical, so they can be walked on by puppets like Connie immediately. When you want to try it out, switch to play mode in the options menu and get Connie to walk around on your sculpture. When you're happy to move on, go back to edit mode and proceed to the next step. What happens when we want to edit an existing sculpture rather than start a new one? Let's investigate. When we went into play mode, we were taken out of sculpt mode. When you're in assembly mode, scope back into your sculpture. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group. Have a go at it now. Now we're here, let's try editing the shapes you've already made. To move or rotate shapes, unequip the Smear Shape tool by pressing circle. This automatically equips the Move tool. You might notice most of the movement controls in sculpt mode are the same as in assembly mode. Grab and move shapes with R2, rotate them using L2 and the sticks or the touchpad. You can hold L1 and move with R2 to clone your shapes or scale them with the up and down buttons. You can even repeat clone. But unlike assembly mode, you can't select things with X in sculpt mode. Now try moving, rotating, and scaling your individual shapes. If you want to smear some more shapes, just go to the Shapes menu and select a shape to sculpt with. Selecting a shape will automatically equip the last sculpting tool you used. Now you can play around at sculpting with different shapes. Don't forget that you can undo and redo at any time. If you accidentally scope out, you can scope back into your sculpture by hovering over it with your imp and pressing L1 and X. In the next step, I'll show you how to color your sculpture. You've probably noticed by now that all your sculptures are orangey brown, like clay. That's the default color, but you can sculpt with any color you like. If you're in assembly mode, hover over your sculpture with your imp, then hold L1 and press X to scope back into it. Next, head to the Colours section in the Sculpt menu and press X over a colour group to see the different shades. Choose a colour, any one you like. And as if by magic, the shape on your imp is now the colour you chose. Any new shapes you make will be that colour, but the old shapes are still brown. Luckily, we can also colour shapes after we've created them, using the spray paint tool. Go to the Sculpt menu and open the Tools section with X. Then select the spray paint tool, which has a spray can icon. Now your imp will have an outline of the current shape on its tip. Intersect the shape with your sculpture and you'll see the spray paint colour appear on it. Hold R2 to apply the spray paint to the shapes. You can try out different colours and shapes to completely change the look of your sculpture. If you want to make it easier to keep your imp on the surface of the sculpture, you can use the Surface Snap guide. You can find Surface Snap in the Sculpt Guides menu. Select it with X to turn it on. There's a Guides menu in every mode, though not all guides are available everywhere. You can also change the finish of your sculpture using the Finishes menu. The Coat, Style and Effects tutorial has more on finishes if you're curious. By now, you should have an organic-looking form, and it will be whatever colour your imagination conjured up. If you switched on Surface Snap, switch it off in the Guides menu before continuing. Just select the button with X to turn it off. Then, when you're ready, proceed to the next step. All these smeared shapes are creating one single sculpture, even if there's space between them. But you can also use the smear tool to remove from the sculpture instead of adding to it. To do that, we need to set the tool to subtract. Scope into your sculpture if you haven't already with L1 and X. When the smear shape tool is equipped to your imp, you can press the triangle button to make it subtract. You'll notice that your imp turns into an outline. The shape on your imp becomes an outline too. You can now use the smear tool to cut into your sculpture. Try using different shapes to see what effect they have. For a really cool effect, try subtracting with a different coloured shape on your imp. How good is that? You can switch the tool between add and subtract by pressing the triangle button. Why not play around with the tools a bit and try to make a dramatic or interesting looking form? When you're happy with its shape, go into play mode and see if you can get Connie across it. If you need to edit it, just come back to edit mode via the options menu. Don't forget to scope back into your sculpture using L1 and X. When Connie is successfully Cross the first gap in play mode, switch back to edit mode, then go to the next step. Smearing shapes can be a messy business. Sometimes you just want to create neat sculptures. Luckily, there are ways to do that. So go to the Assembly menu and select Sculpt in the Modes menu. This will create a new sculpture. Now let's practice sculpting an architectural structure over the second gap. To help us build a neater bridge, open the Guides section of the Sculpt menu. In Guides, switch on Grid Snap by pressing X over it. You'll see a number appear next to the button. That's how big the grid squares will be. You'll notice the white dotted grid in the scene. The spacing of the dots shows the tightness of the grid. They will change orientation depending on your point of view. We'll leave it on the default setting for now. You can experiment with it later. Now try making a colourful sculpture using the Smear and Move tools and the Colours menu. This'll just be a practice one, so don't spend too long on it. We'll delete it and make an even better one in a minute. You'll notice that it's much easier to keep your shapes neat and straight this time. That's because Grid Snap is active. It makes your tools and objects snap to the grid. It also helps you rotate precisely. Try it out using L2 or the touchpad. With Grid Snap on, objects rotate 45 degrees at a time. You can rotate the shape on the end of your imp before you stamp it, or use the Move tool to rotate shapes that are already placed. When you're comfortable sculpting with Grid Snap, continue to the next step. If we want to make a super neat bridge, there's another guide we can use. If you're still in Sculpt mode, scope out of it with L1 and circle. Once you're in Assembly mode, delete your sculpture with triangle. Go to the Modes menu. Click the Sculpt Mode button to start a new sculpture. Now we're in Sculpt mode, the Guides menu will have different options. Open the Guides menu and switch on the Mirror Guide. Don't worry about the two additional options. Let's investigate them later. Also, check the Grid Snap is still turned on. Now select the Smear tool in your chosen colour and shape. The Mirror Guide will always centre on the first shape you make. That's why we started a new sculpture. Now, move your view so you can see all of the second gap, and your imp can reach it. If you need to, use the grab cam to zoom out a little from the shape on your imp. Now stamp your first shape right in the centre of the gap to enable the Mirror Guide. Then smear your shape from the centre over to the edge of the gap where it meets the platform. You'll see that your sculpt is mirrored, so you only have to make half of the bridge, and it'll be nice and symmetrical, leaving you to focus on making it fabulous. Carry on sculpting and carving your bridge until you're happy. Test it in play mode. And when Connie is over the second gap, return to edit mode via the options menu. When you're back in edit mode, switch off the Mirror Guide. You can also switch off Grid Snap if you want, before moving on to the next step. Now we need to create a bridge across the last gap. For that, we're going to use the mighty Stamp tool. First, we'll need to create a new sculpture by going to Sculpt mode via the Modes menu. Now that you're in Sculpt mode, make sure you've switched off the mirror guide before you continue. You'll be equipped with the Smear Shape tool by default, so you'll need to switch to the Stamp Shape tool. You can find Stamp Shape in the Sculpt mode Tools menu, next to Smear Shape. Its icon is a simple square. You can quickly switch between the Stamp and Smear tools using L1 and Triangle. Or you can set Stamp Shape to be your default sculpting tool in the My Preferences menu. That way, Stamp Shape will be automatically equipped when you start a new sculpture. Stamping shapes is a bit like stamping objects from the Dreamiverse. With the Stamp Shape tool, you only stamp one shape at a time, no matter how long you hold R2 or X. This has additional benefits too, which you'll see later. Now select the cube in the Shapes menu, then stamp one at the side of the gap. We're almost there, Connie! Open the Sculpt Tools menu again, and this time pick the Stretch tool. Its icon is a double-ended arrow. When Stretch is selected, hovering your imp over a shape will cause an arrow gizmo to appear. Hover over the side of the cube that's facing the opposite platform. Press and hold R2 when the arrow is showing, and use your imp to stretch the shape across the gap. Nice! Let go of R2 when you're done stretching. It's not a very exciting bridge right now, but I've got something great to customize it with soon. You can stretch any shape you've sculpted, regardless of what shape it is. Spheres, cones, and even donuts can be stretched. You can even stretch subtracted shapes, but only at the points where they intersect with the sculpture. Have some fun with the Stretch tool, but don't go to play mode just yet. When you're ready to take this bridge and your sculpting skills to the next level, continue to the final step. So far, I've shown you a few ways to edit the shapes you've already sculpted. But there's also a way to edit the shape before stamping or smearing. First of all, make sure you're still scoped into the sculpture. If not, hover over the bridge, hold L1 and press X to scope in. Also, make sure that you're using the stamp shape tool and not the smear shape. Next, choose a shape from the Shapes menu and select what color you want it to be. Now move the new shape right next to the bridge so that they're touching. Use the grab cam to make sure the shape is in contact with your bridge. Now hold L1 and press square to open the shape editor, just like when you want to tweak something. When you're in the shape editor, you can let go of L1 and the shape will be fixed in place while editing. Notice the Sculpt menu has been replaced with the Shape Editor menu. The buttons vary a little depending on which tool and shape you're using. The Shape Editor for the Stamp tool has quite a few options. We're only interested in one for now, the most exciting one, Soft Blend. The icon is the one with the two circles blending together. If the option isn't there, just check that you have the Stamp Shape tool equipped and not Smear Shape. This is important. Next to the icon, there's a slider and a toggle button. Sliders in the Shape Editor are round, which may seem unusual, but they work just like the sliders in tweak menus. The Blend Amount slider affects how much the shape will blend with other shapes nearby. Try holding X on the slider and moving your imp up and down. This is how you get some truly amazing shapes. The Hard Blend toggle switches between hard and soft blends. Toggle between the two options with X to see the difference it makes. To close the shape editor, just press Circle. Now have a play with your blendable shape. You can only blend shapes that are part of the same sculpture. So if you can't see any blending on your shape, scope into the sculpture with L1 and X.
You can make some very cool shapes using blending. Try blending subtracted shapes too.
Experiment with different shapes and blends on your bridge. Make it really fancy. You can jump back into the shape editor with L1 and square. You can use the shape editor in any of the sculpting tools. Try using Soft Blend with the Spray Paint tool. To exit the shape editor and return to sculpting, just press Circle. When you've got the hang of the shape editor and you're happy with your bridge, try it out in play mode and get Connie to Cuthbert. Take Connie through the door to finish the tutorial.
Are you ready?
You